The first time Elena Moretti saw Luca Romano, she was 19 years old. She wasn't supposed to be on the top floor of the Romano estate. The accounting department had just hired her a week earlier, and her supervisor had handed her a stack of financial reports with hurried instructions. Take these to the boss's office. Don't speak unless he speaks first. Leave the reports on his desk and come straight back. Everyone in the Romano family knew the rules. Never keep Luca Romano waiting. Never ask unnecessary questions. Never look frightened. Elena repeated those rules in her mind as she climbed the grand staircase, her heartbeat echoing louder with every step. Armed guards stood outside the large mahogany doors, their expressions unreadable. One of them knocked twice before pushing the door open. "The reports, boss." Luca didn't answer. The guard stepped aside, silently allowing Elena to enter. She walked inside, trying to steady her breathing. The office was larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Bookshelves lined one wall, while maps, photographs, and security monitors covered another. The faint scent of expensive whiskey and cedar lingered in the air. Behind an enormous black desk sat Luca Romano. He couldn't have been more than 30. His charcoal suit fit him perfectly. His dark hair was neatly combed back, and the silver watch on his wrist caught the afternoon sunlight as he signed document after document. He never looked up. Elena carefully placed the reports on the desk. "They're from accounting, Mr. Romano." No response. She took a small step backward. Unfortunately, the heel of her shoe caught the edge of the thick rug. She stumbled. The files she had tucked under her arms scattered across the polished floor. For one horrifying second, the office fell completely silent. Heat rushed to Elena's face as she hurried to gather the papers with trembling hands. "I'm so sorry." A shadow stopped beside her. Large hands picked up the last few pages before she could reach them. Elena slowly lifted her eyes. Luca Romano was standing only a few feet away. He held the papers in one hand and studied her with calm, unreadable eyes. She had expected anger. Instead, his voice was quiet. "You've brought me last month's report." Confused, Elena blinked. What?" He extended the papers toward her. "This should have been replaced yesterday." She looked down. He was right. Somehow the wrong report had been mixed into the stack. Mortification settled over her. "I'll fix it immediately." Luca gave a single nod. "Do that." Nothing more. No shouting, no threats. He simply returned to his desk and continued reading another file, as though the interruption had never happened. Elena quietly left the office, clutching the reports against her chest. The heavy doors closed behind her. Only then did she realize she had been holding her breath. One of the guards glanced at her. "You still have your job?" She looked at him in confusion. He shrugged. "Most people don't make mistakes in front of the boss twice." Elena managed a weak smile before hurrying downstairs. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. She corrected the reports, apologized to her supervisor, and buried herself in work until sunset. But no matter how hard she tried, her thoughts kept drifting back to the man upstairs. Not because he was handsome, not because he was feared, but because everyone had described Luca Romano as merciless. Yet when he had every reason to humiliate her, he simply corrected her mistake. It was such a small act, so ordinary, so unexpectedly kind. That night, lying awake in her tiny apartment, Elena replayed the moment over and over again. She didn't know it then, but a single quiet afternoon inside a corner office had just changed the course of her life. Outside, the city slept beneath a blanket of rain. Inside the Romano estate, Luca Romano continued working long after midnight. He had already forgotten the young accountant who had dropped her papers. Elena, however, would never forget him.
4 years passed. Nothing changed.
Every morning, Elena arrived at the Romano estate before anyone else in the accounting department. She organized reports, balanced ledgers, and quietly corrected mistakes before they reached Luca Romano's desk. He rarely noticed who delivered the files. She preferred it that way. Watching him from a distance had become part of her routine. She learned the little things no one else seemed to notice. He never drank coffee after noon. He always loosened his tie before difficult meetings, and whenever he was deep in thought, he absent-mindedly tapped his ring finger against the desk. Tiny details, meaningless to everyone else. Everything to her. That afternoon, Elena stepped into the conference room to leave the weekly financial reports. Several captains were already seated around the long table, speaking in hushed voices. Luca stood at the head of the table, studying a map spread across the polished wood. Without looking up, he extended his hand. The reports. She placed the folder in his hand. Our quarterly projections are marked in blue tabs, boss. Good. One word. Nothing more. Elena nodded politely and turned to leave. As she reached the door, one of the older captains chuckled. Our boss is finally settling down. Another grinned. The engagement will strengthen the alliance. Elena's hand froze on the doorknob. Engagement? You've made the right choice. Miss Sofia De Luca will make a fine wife. Luca didn't smile. It's what's best for the family. The words struck Elena harder than she expected. She slipped out before anyone noticed the change in her expression. The hallway suddenly felt too narrow, too quiet. She kept walking until she reached the empty archive room, gently closed the door, and leaned against it. She had always known this day would come. A man like Luca Romano wouldn't remain unmarried forever. Still, knowing something was inevitable didn't make it hurt any less. After several long breaths, she straightened her shoulders, wiped the corner of her eye, and returned to work. No one in the accounting office noticed anything unusual. By evening, every report had been completed, every invoice had been signed, every smile had looked convincing. Only Elena knew how exhausted she felt. As she gathered her belongings to leave, her supervisor hurried towards her. Elena? Yes? The boss wants last month's financial summaries delivered to his office. She looked toward the staircase leading to the top floor. Her heart skipped once. It would be the first time they had spoken in months. She silently picked up the files and walked upstairs. The hallway outside Luca's office was unusually quiet. Elena adjusted the folder in her hands before nodding to the guards. One of them opened the door. The financial summaries, boss. Luca didn't look up. Come in. Elena stepped inside and placed the folder neatly on his desk. Last month's financial summaries. He reached for the file, flipping through the pages without a word. A brief silence settled between them. Then he frowned. Who prepared these? Elena's stomach tightened. I did. He turned another page. The discrepancies from the shipping accounts. They've been corrected. His eyes moved to the attached notes. You found them? Yes. The previous reports missed nearly 2 million. I know. He closed the folder. For the first time since she'd entered, he looked directly at her. You've been with accounting for 4 years. His expression remained unreadable. And no one thought to tell me my accountant has been fixing everyone else's mistakes? Elena hesitated. I was only doing my job. A faint huff escaped him. It wasn't quite a laugh. Clearly better than some of my managers. She blinked, unsure how to respond. You may go. Yes, boss. She turned toward the door. Elena. She stopped. It was the first time she had ever heard him say her name. Slowly, she looked back. Good work. 2 simple words, yet they stole every bit of air from her lungs. Thank you. She left before her emotions could betray her. The heavy door clicked shut behind her. One of the guards glanced at her. You look happier than when you walked in. She quickly looked away. I'm just relieved. She hurried down the staircase, unable to stop the small smile tugging at her lips. For everyone else, it had been an ordinary conversation. For Elena, Luca Romano had remembered her name. Later that evening, the Romano estate grew unusually busy. Luxury cars filled the courtyard. Members of another Mafia family arrived under heavy security. Elena watched from the accounting office window as a graceful woman stepped out of the lead car. She wore an elegant black dress, confidence radiating from every step. One of the assistants whispered beside Elena, "That's Sofia De Luca, the boss's fiancée." Elena lowered her eyes and quietly returned to her paperwork. Moments later, laughter echoed through the hallway. Sofia's voice, warm, confident, followed by Luca's calm reply. Elena couldn't make out the words. She didn't want to. Instead, she focused on the numbers in front of her until they blurred together. Then, a sharp gunshot shattered the silence outside the estate. The entire building froze.
The gunshot was followed by a second. Then shouting erupted outside. Within seconds, armed guards rushed through the corridors, barking orders into their radios. "Lock down the estate. No one leaves the building." Elena's heart pounded as she stood from her desk. The accounting office emptied in a panic, but she remained where she was. Another gunshot echoed through the estate, much closer this time. A few moments later, the office door burst open. "Everyone stay inside," one guard ordered, before hurrying away. The room fell silent. No one dared move. Nearly 20 minutes later, the shooting stopped. The estate gradually returned to life. Employees cautiously stepped into the hallway, exchanging nervous whispers. It was an attack. They never made it past the front gate. I heard 3 men are dead. No one knew whose. Elena quietly gathered a stack of invoices that had fallen from her desk during the commotion. As she bent to pick up the last page, hurried footsteps approached. Marco, one of Luca's senior captains, stopped outside the office. "There you are." Elena looked up. "Boss wants every financial record related to the Morelli family." "The Morellis?" "Immediately." She nodded without asking questions. "If they attack today," Marco muttered, "we're going to find out who paid them." An hour later, Elena entered Luca's office carrying 3 thick ledgers. The room looked different than it had earlier. One of the windows had been cracked by a stray bullet. 2 guards stood near the entrance. A city map covered the desk, marked with circles in red ink. Luca barely acknowledged her arrival. "The records." She placed them beside him. "I also included every payment made through shell companies during the past 6 months." That made him pause. "I didn't ask for that. I thought it might help." He studied her for a moment before opening the first ledger. His eyes scanned the pages. Then he flipped back. Again. Finally, he looked at her. "Who highlighted these transactions?" "I did." "They're connected." "Yes." A slow silence filled the office. Luca picked up one page. "If you're right," his voice trailed off. One payment stood out. It had been made just 3 days earlier to a company that no longer existed. Luca's expression hardened. There was a leak. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Someone inside the Romano family had helped today's attackers. Luca closed the ledger with a quiet thud. Then he gave his next order. "Find out who approved this payment." Elena looked down at the signature. The ink was unmistakable. She recognized the handwriting. And for the first time in 4 years, she wished she didn't. The office fell silent. Elena stared at the signature at the bottom of the page. She knew it. Not because she had seen it once, because she had processed hundreds of documents signed by the same person. Victor Salazar, Luca's chief financial advisor, a man who had worked for the Romano family for nearly 20 years. She looked up. There might be another explanation. Luca watched her carefully. "Is there?" "I'd like to verify it first." He held her gaze for a moment before giving a single nod. "You have until tomorrow morning." "Yes, boss." She picked up the ledger and quietly left. That evening, the accounting floor was nearly empty. Only the soft hum of fluorescent lights filled the room. Elena spread dozens of payment records across her desk. One by one, she compared signatures, dates, and account numbers. Something felt wrong. The signature looked genuine, but the approval code didn't. Her eyes moved to another document, then another. Suddenly, she froze. The payment hadn't been approved from inside the Romano estate. Someone had copied Victor's signature onto forged documents, which meant the traitor wanted everyone to suspect him. Elena quickly gathered the files. She had to tell Luca. As she stepped into the dim hallway, voices drifted from around the corner. She instinctively stopped. The accountant? A man laughed quietly. She doesn't know anything. Another voice replied, make sure she never does. Elena's pulse quickened. They were talking about her. She slowly backed away, careful not to make a sound. Just as she reached the staircase, a floorboard creaked beneath her shoe. The hallway fell silent. Someone spoke. Who's there? Heavy footsteps started moving towards her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She turned and hurried down the staircase, trying not to run. Behind her, the footsteps grew faster. Someone was following her. She reached the lobby and slipped into the crowd of employees leaving for the night. Only then did the footsteps stop. She didn't dare look back. An hour later, Elena locked the door of her apartment and leaned against it, finally allowing herself to breathe. The files were still clutched tightly against her chest. Someone inside the Romano estate knew she was asking questions. Someone wanted her silenced. Her phone suddenly rang. The caller ID displayed only one word: Romano estate. With trembling fingers, Elena answered. Hello? Marco's voice came through the line. Elena, the boss wants to see you. Right now. Her blood ran cold.
30 minutes later, Elena arrived at the Romano estate. The mansion was quieter than usual. Guards stood at every entrance, their expressions tense after the afternoon's attack. Marco met her at the front door. This way. Neither of them spoke as they climbed to the second floor. When Marco opened Luca's office door, Elena stepped inside. Luca stood by the window, the city lights reflecting off the glass. You found something. It wasn't a question. Yes, boss. She handed him the folder. The payment was forged. He opened it immediately. I checked the authorization codes. They don't match our system. Someone copied Mr. Salazar's signature to frame him. Luca flipped through the pages in silence. When he finished, he closed the folder. I had Victor detained an hour ago. Elena's heart sank. If I'm right, he's innocent. Luca's jaw tightened. I know. The room fell quiet. Finally, he looked at her. You just saved the life of a loyal man. Elena lowered her eyes. I only followed the numbers. No. His voice was calm. You noticed what everyone else missed. Before she could respond, a knock interrupted them. A guard entered, his face pale. Boss. What is it? We caught one of the shooters. Luca's expression hardened. Alive? Yes. He wants to speak only to you. Luca buttoned his suit jacket. Keep him breathing until I get there. The guard nodded and hurried out. Luca picked up his gun from the desk. As he walked toward the door, he suddenly stopped. Without turning around, he said, It's late. Elena looked at him confused. You shouldn't go home alone tonight. She blinked. I'll be fine. No. This time his voice carried the authority everyone feared. I'll have 2 men escort you. It wasn't necessary. It wasn't a suggestion. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elena gave a small nod. Thank you. Luca left the office without another word. She watched the door close behind him. It was the first time in 4 years that he'd shown concern for her safety. She told herself it was because she was an important witness, nothing more. Yet the thought stayed with her all the way home.
Meanwhile, beneath the Romano estate, the captured gunman sat tied to a chair in the interrogation room. His face was bruised, but he smiled as Luca entered. "I've been waiting for you." Luca pulled up a chair. "Talk." He chuckled. "You've been looking for the traitor in the wrong place." He leaned forward, blood staining his teeth. "The person who's going to destroy you already works inside your house."
The interrogation continued long past midnight. No matter what Luca's men did, the gunman refused to reveal a name. He repeated the same sentence over and over. "Someone inside your house wants you dead." By the time Luca left the basement, dawn was beginning to break. The next morning, Elena arrived at the estate with barely 3 hours of sleep. She had spent most of the night thinking about the forged documents. If someone could manipulate the financial records so easily, they had access to the accounting department. That meant the traitor wasn't just inside the Romano family. They were close, very close. As she stepped into the accounting office, her supervisor looked up. "Good, you're here." He handed her a sealed envelope. "The boss wants this delivered personally." Elena accepted it with a nod. She climbed the familiar staircase once again. This time, the guards opened the door without asking her name. Luca was seated behind his desk, speaking with Marco. The conversation stopped when she entered. "The contracts, boss." She placed the envelope on his desk. Before she could leave, Marco spoke. "Boss, shouldn't we tell her?" Luca's eyes remained on the documents. "Not yet." Marco frowned but stayed silent. Elena hesitated. "Is something wrong?" Luca finally looked at her. "From today onward, no one enters the accounting archives without your permission." She blinked. "My permission?" "I've reassigned access." She couldn't hide her surprise. "I'm not a manager." "You are now." The words hung in the air. Marco smiled faintly. "Congratulations." Elena looked back at Luca. "I don't understand." "You've earned my trust." Her heart skipped. Trust. Not praise, not gratitude. Trust. She quietly lowered her head. "I won't disappoint you." "I know." For a brief moment, the room was completely still. Then the office door swung open. A woman entered without knocking. She wore a cream-colored dress, diamonds glittering around her neck. Sofia De Luca. She walked straight to Luca and kissed his cheek as though no one else existed. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Only then did she notice Elena. Her smile faded. "And who is she?" Luca answered simply. "Elena. She works for me." Sofia's eyes swept over Elena from top to bottom before a polite smile returned. "I see." Elena bowed her head. "I'll take my leave." She walked out without another word. The door closed softly behind her. Inside the office, Sofia folded her arms. "She's pretty." Luca returned to reading the contracts. "I've never noticed." Outside the office, Elena paused for only a second. Then she forced herself to keep walking. She hadn't heard his answer, but somehow, it still hurt.
The afternoon passed quietly. Elena buried herself in work, grateful for the endless stack of invoices waiting on her desk. Numbers were easier than emotions. Just before sunset, her supervisor approached. "Miss Sophia is looking for you." Elena stood. "For me?" "She said she needs help with the charity gala accounts." Elena nodded and made her way to the east wing of the estate. Sophia was waiting in one of the private lounges, elegantly dressed despite having nowhere to be. She smiled warmly as Elena entered. "Thank you for coming." "You needed the gala accounts?" "I did." Sophia gestured toward the sofa. "Sit." Elena remained standing. "I'd rather stand." Sophia's smile thinned ever so slightly. "As you wish." She picked up a velvet jewelry box from the table and opened it. Inside lay a diamond bracelet.
It was a gift from Luca. Elena's chest tightened. It's beautiful. It is. Sophia closed the box. You've worked here a long time. 4 years. Then perhaps you can answer something for me. Elena waited. Why does Luca suddenly trust you so much? The question caught her off guard. I'm not sure. No? Sophia studied her carefully. He rarely compliments people. He didn't compliment me. He promoted you. Elena had no answer. After a long silence, Sophia smiled again. I suppose you are simply very good at your job. I try to be. Good. She stood, smoothing her dress. That's all. Confused, Elena nodded politely and left. The entire conversation had felt less like a discussion and more like an interrogation. Later that evening, Elena walked toward the employee parking area. The estate grounds were unusually quiet. Halfway across the courtyard, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. Miss Moretti. She turned. One of the younger guards approached, breathing heavily. You forgot your folder. He handed it to her. Thank you. As she reached for it, something caught her eye. A black sedan sat just beyond the estate gates. Its engine was running. The windows were tinted. The car hadn't been there when she'd arrived. The guard followed her gaze. Do you know them? Elena slowly shook her head. No. The sedan remained perfectly still, watching. A chill crept down her spine. The guard's radio suddenly crackled. Unit 3, report immediately. He glanced at the radio, then back at Elena. I have to go. Elena felt a pang of unease. It's only a short walk to your car. I'll be fine. He nodded and hurried away. Elena took another step toward the parking lot. The black sedan's headlights switched on. Then, it began rolling slowly towards her.
The sedan accelerated. Elena froze for a split second before instinct took over. She ran. Its tires screeched across the pavement as it swerved toward her instead of the driveway. It wasn't trying to pass. It was aiming for her. Help! She cried. The estate guards turned at the sound. Before anyone could react, the rear window rolled down. A masked man leaned out. A gun glinted beneath the courtyard lights. Bang! The bullet shattered the stone fountain inches from Elena. She stumbled, losing her balance. Another shot rang out. Then a pair of strong arms grabbed her from behind and pulled her to the ground. Stay down, Luca's voice. He shielded her as more bullets struck the marble steps nearby. Return fire, Marco shouted. The courtyard erupted into chaos. Guards fired toward the fleeing sedan, while others rushed to surround Luca and Elena. The driver swerved through the open gates and disappeared into the night. Silence returned almost as quickly as it had vanished. Luca remained crouched beside Elena. Are you hurt? She shook her head, unable to speak. His eyes searched her face before moving to her trembling hands. Only then did he notice the thin line of blood running down her wrist. A shard of stone had cut her during the shooting. It's nothing, she whispered. Luca ignored her. He removed a clean handkerchief from his pocket and wrapped it carefully around the cut. His movements were surprisingly gentle. By then, Marco had reached them. The car escaped. Luca stood, helping Elena to her feet. Find it. We're already tracking. I said, find it. Marco nodded and hurried away. Luca turned back to Elena. You're coming inside. I don't want to cause trouble. His expression darkened. Someone just tried to kill you. She fell silent. He led her into the mansion without another word. As they entered the grand hall, dozens of employees stared. Whispers spread through the room. The boss carried her. Why was she the target? Who would attack an accountant? Elena kept her eyes on the floor. She could already feel the rumors beginning. An hour later, after the estate doctor treated the cut on Elena's wrist, Elena stepped into the hallway. She intended to leave quietly. Instead, she overheard Luca speaking inside his office. Double her security. Marco sounded surprised. You think they'll come after her again? Luca answered without hesitation. They weren't sending a message. A heavy silence followed. They were trying to eliminate someone who knows too much. Elena's breath caught. She hadn't realized it before. The forged documents, the voices in the hallway, the sedan, None of it had been a coincidence. Someone wanted her dead before she uncovered the truth.
The night had grown quiet again. Luca stood by the window of his office, reading the incident report for the third time. It wasn't random, Marco said. They ignored every guard. They went straight for Elena. I know. Marco hesitated. What are your orders? Luca set the report aside. Move her. To one of the safe houses? No. Marco frowned. Then where? Luca met his eyes. Here. 10 minutes later, Elena was called back upstairs. She stepped into the office, still wearing the bandage around her wrist. You wanted to see me, boss? I did. Luca motioned for her to sit. She remained standing. I'm fine. Sit. She obeyed. The attack wasn't a coincidence. Until we find the person responsible, you're not returning to your apartment. She stared at him. What? You'll be staying in the east wing of the estate. I can't. You can. I'll only inconvenience everyone. You won't. She swallowed. People will talk. They already are. His answer left her speechless. Luca leaned back in his chair. I don't care about rumors. I do. His gaze remained steady. You won't be staying here because you're an employee. She looked at him confused. You'll be staying because you're under my protection. The words echoed in the room. For 4 years, Elena had imagined countless conversations with Luca. None of them had sounded like this. She struggled to find the right words. I don't want special treatment. This isn't special treatment. His tone became firmer. It's security. She knew arguing further would accomplish nothing. After a long silence, she nodded. All right, I'll have someone prepare a room. As she stood to leave, Lucas spoke again. Elena. She turned. If you remember anything at all, tell me immediately. I will. She quietly left the office. Later that night, a maid showed Elena to a guest room in the east wing. It was larger than her entire apartment. She placed her small overnight bag beside the bed and walked to the window. The estate grounds looked peaceful from above, too peaceful. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door. One of the guards stood outside. The boss asked me to deliver this. He handed her a small paper bag. Inside was a first aid kit, a fresh bandage, and a note written in neat handwriting. Change the dressing before you sleep. Nothing more. No signature. It didn't need one. A faint smile touched Elena's lips. Then her eyes drifted to the window. Far beyond the estate gates, a black sedan was parked beneath a streetlight. Its engine was off, but someone inside was watching the mansion, waiting. The next morning, Elena woke earlier than usual. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the elegant guest room, the high ceilings, and the distant voices in the hallway reminded her. She was still inside the Romano estate. After getting dressed, she quietly made her way downstairs, hoping to avoid attention. Instead, she found Luca in the garden. He stood near the fountain, a cup of black coffee in one hand while reading a folder with the other. He hadn't noticed her. Elena considered turning around. Good morning. His voice stopped her. She looked over her shoulder. Good morning, boss. He closed the folder. How's your wrist? It barely hurts. Show me. Surprised, she held out her hand. Luca glanced at the bandage. You changed it. She nodded. As instructed. For the first time, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Good. The tiny smile disappeared almost as quickly as it came. Join me. She hesitated before taking a seat across from him. A maid immediately brought another cup of coffee. I don't drink coffee, Elena said softly. Without looking away from the folder, Luca replied, Then tea. The maid silently exchanged it for tea. Elena couldn't help but notice. He remembered. 4 years ago, during a company dinner, she'd refused coffee because it gave her migraines. He had been sitting at the other end of the table. She had assumed he hadn't even heard her. So, Luca said, setting the folder aside. "You've been working here 4 years." "Yes." "And you've never asked me for a promotion." "I never felt the need." "Why?" She smiled faintly. "I like numbers. People usually like money more. I have enough." Luca studied her for a moment. "You don't seem afraid of me." The question caught her off guard. She lowered her eyes before answering honestly. "I respect you. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie." Before Luca could respond, hurried footsteps echoed across the garden. Marco approached, his expression grim. "We found the sedan." "Where?" "Abandoned near the river." "And the driver?" Marco shook his head. "Gone." He handed Luca a transparent evidence bag. There was only one thing left inside. Luca looked through the plastic. His expression hardened. "What is it?" Elena asked quietly. Marco looked at Elena. "It's your employee file." Every color drained from Elena's face. Someone hadn't just been watching her. They'd been studying her. The garden fell silent. Luca stared at the evidence bag before handing it to Elena. With trembling fingers, she opened the file. Nothing was missing. Her employment records, performance reviews, emergency contact information, even the address of her apartment. She looked up. This file was kept in human resources. Luca's expression darkened. "Which means someone inside the estate took it." Marco nodded. There were no signs of forced entry. Elena's stomach tightened. Whoever was after her hadn't guessed where she lived. They had known. An hour later, Luca gathered his senior staff in the conference room. The atmosphere was tense. "No one leaves the estate until I say otherwise," Luca said. Several captains exchanged uneasy glances. One of them frowned. "You think the traitor is one of us?" "I know the traitor had help." Silence followed. Luca's gaze swept across the room. "From this moment on, every department reports directly to me." No one argued. The meeting ended just before noon. As the others filed out, Luca stopped Elena. "Stay." She closed the door behind the last captain. "You wanted to see me?" "I have a question." She nodded. "When you overheard those men talking the other night, did you recognize either voice?" Elena hesitated. "I wasn't sure before. And now?" She took a slow breath. "I think I recognized one of them." Luca waited. "It sounded like—" A knock interrupted. Marco stepped inside. "Boss, Sophia is here." Luca frowned. "I told everyone not to disturb me." She insisted. Before anyone could respond, Sophia entered the room carrying a shopping bag. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Her eyes landed on Elena. "Oh, you two are alone?" The room grew uncomfortable. Sophia smiled pleasantly and placed the bag on Luca's desk. "I brought you lunch." Luca's attention remained on Elena. "We're in the middle of something." "I can see that." Sophia turned toward Elena. "I've been looking for you." "For me?" "Yes." She reached into her handbag and produced a folded invitation. "I'm hosting a charity gala next week. I'd like you to attend." Elena blinked. "I don't think that's appropriate." "I insist." Before Elena could refuse again, Luca spoke. "If Elena goes—" Both women looked at him. "She'll attend as part of my security detail." The room fell silent. Sophia's smile faltered for the first time. Elena was equally stunned. She wasn't a bodyguard. She wasn't family. Yet Luca had just made it clear where he expected her to be, at his side. 3 days passed without another attack. The estate remained under tight security, but life slowly settled into a routine. Elena spent her days reviewing financial records, searching for the missing link in the forged payments. She found nothing. Whoever had covered their tracks knew exactly what they were doing. The evening of the charity gala arrived. Luxury cars lined the entrance of the Romano Hotel, owned by Luca's organization. Politicians, businessmen, and powerful families filled the grand ballroom. Elena had almost refused to come, but an order from Luca was something she could not ignore.
She wore a simple navy blue gown borrowed from one of the estate's stylists. It was elegant without drawing attention, exactly how she preferred it. As she entered the ballroom, conversation seemed to pause. Several guests glanced in her direction. Who is she? I've never seen her before. She came with the Romano family. Elena ignored the whispers. She quietly took her place near the back of the room. An hour later, Luca arrived. The ballroom fell silent. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, he acknowledged the guests with little more than a nod. Sophia slipped her arm through his. Cameras flashed. The perfect couple. Elena looked away. She reminded herself why she was there. Security, nothing else. Later that evening, Marco approached her. The boss wants the updated donor list. I left it in the conference suite upstairs. I'll get it. She made her way to the private floor above the ballroom. The hallway was empty. She unlocked the conference suite and quickly found the folder. As she turned to leave, voices echoed from the adjoining room. Tonight. A man, then another. He'll never see it coming. Elena's pulse quickened. She stepped closer to the partially open door. Once Romano signs the partnership agreement, he dies. Her breath caught. An assassination. Tonight. She reached for her phone. No signal. The thick concrete walls blocked it. She turned to run downstairs. A hand clamped over her mouth. She was yanked backward into the dark room. Quiet, a rough voice whispered. If you scream, you'll die before Romano does. The folder slipped from her hands, papers scattering across the floor. Downstairs, unaware of what had happened, Luca accepted a glass of champagne from a waiter. Just as he lifted it, Marco noticed something. Boss? Luca looked at him. Where's Elena?
Marco's question lingered in the air. Luca slowly lowered the champagne glass. She went upstairs. 5 minutes ago. Luca glanced toward the grand staircase. 5 minutes had become 10, then 15. Elena should have returned by now. He set the glass on a passing server's tray. Find her. Marco immediately signaled the guards. Within seconds, several men disappeared into the upper floors. Upstairs, Elena struggled against the man restraining her. He tightened his grip over her mouth. Stop fighting. The second man gathered the scattered papers from the floor. She heard everything. What do we do? The first man looked toward the hallway. We finish this now. He pulled a knife from beneath his jacket. Elena's heart lurched. She twisted with everything she had. The heel of her shoe slammed onto his foot. He cursed, loosening his grip for just a second. It was enough. Elena shoved him backward and sprinted into the hallway. Catch her! Footsteps thundered behind her. She ran toward the staircase, her lungs burning. Just as she reached the landing, a gunshot echoed through the corridor. The bullet struck the wall beside her. She stumbled but kept running. Another shot. This one shattered the chandelier above the stairs. Guests below screamed as crystal rained across the marble floor. Every head in the ballroom turned upward. Luca looked up. His blood ran cold. Elena appeared at the top of the staircase, terrified, running for her life. A masked man emerged behind her with a gun. Without thinking, Luca charged toward the stairs. Elena! She looked down at the sound of his voice. For the first time that night, relief crossed her face. The gunman raised his weapon. Luca drew his pistol. One shot. The bullet struck the attacker in the shoulder. He fell backward. The second man disappeared into the hallway. Marco and the guards rushed upstairs in pursuit. Luca reached Elena just as her knees gave way. He caught her before she hit the floor. Look at me. She nodded weakly. I'm okay. No. His hands searched her arms and shoulders for injuries. Then he saw it. Blood. A thin stream running down the side of her neck where a bullet had grazed her. His jaw clenched. Doctor! The ballroom had fallen completely silent.
Hundreds of guests watched as the feared Luca Romano held Elena as though letting go wasn't an option. Ignoring every curious stare, he looked down at her. His voice was low, almost pleading. What did they say? Elena swallowed painfully. They're not trying, she struggled for breath, to kill you anymore. Luca frowned. They're trying, her eyes met his, to start a war from inside your family.
The ballroom remained frozen in chaos. Security sealed every exit within seconds. Guests were moved away, whispers turning into panic, but Luca barely registered any of it. His focus was entirely on Elena. He held her steady as Marco and 2 guards secured the area. "Clear the floors," Luca ordered sharply. "No one leaves the hotel." Marco nodded and disappeared into the crowd. Elena tried to stand on her own, but her legs gave out again. Luca tightened his grip immediately. "Don't move." "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice shook. "You're bleeding. It's just a scratch." His eyes darkened. "That's not what I asked." The doctor arrived within minutes, escorted by security. He quickly assessed the shallow wound on Elena's neck. "Surface injury. She's lucky." Luca didn't respond. He only watched Elena as if checking whether she was still breathing. 20 minutes later, the attackers had been captured, but the confession they gave changed everything. Marco entered Luca's private suite upstairs, expression grave. "They weren't hired to kill you directly. They were instructed to create confusion at the gala, to make it look like an internal betrayal." Luca stood by the window, still holding Elena's blood-stained handkerchief. "By who?" Marco hesitated. "One of your closest advisors was supposed to finalize the partnership deal tonight." Luca's gaze sharpened. "Salazar?" Marco nodded. "But there's more." He placed a small device on the table. A tracker was found on Elena's belongings. Silence dropped like a blade. Luca slowly turned. "Her belongings?" Marco lowered his voice. "In the guest room. It was planted days ago." Luca's expression shifted for the first time all night. Not anger. Recognition. Someone had been tracking Elena long before the gala, before the attack, before anyone else even noticed her importance. Meanwhile, in the adjoining room, Elena sat wrapped in a blanket, a medic checking her vitals. She looked exhausted, but her mind wasn't on the wound. It was on what she overheard. "They're trying to start a war from inside your family." Those words wouldn't leave her. She stood slowly, despite the medic's protest. "I need to speak to Luca." "No," the medic said. "You need rest." "I remember something," she insisted. That made the guard outside hesitate. He radioed upstairs. A minute later, Marco appeared. He studied her carefully. "The boss is coming." Elena nodded. "Tell him I know why they chose me." Marco stiffened. Before he could respond, footsteps approached the door. Luca entered. His eyes immediately went to her, then softened just slightly. "What is it?" Elena took a breath. "They didn't pick me randomly." Luca waited. She looked straight at him. "I think I know who they are to them." A pause. Then she added quietly, "And I think I've been part of this war long before I ever knew it."
The room went completely still. Luca didn't speak immediately. He studied Elena's face instead, as if trying to understand whether she was speaking from fear or certainty. "Explain," he said finally. Elena tightened the blanket around her shoulders. "I've been reviewing the financial discrepancies again, not just the forged payments, the older ones too." Marco frowned. "Older?" "Yes, over the past 2 years." Luca's expression sharpened slightly. "What did you find?" Elena hesitated, then looked directly at him. Every major leak, every attack pattern, every internal movement that was exposed. She paused. "They all happened shortly after I processed or reviewed the reports involved." Silence. Marco straightened.
That doesn't make sense. It does, Elena said quietly. If someone has been watching me, they don't need access to the entire system. She swallowed. They only need access to what I see. A heavy tension filled the room. Luca stepped closer. You're saying you were used as a filter? Elena nodded slowly. I think I've been unintentionally forwarding patterns, cleaning data, highlighting inconsistencies. Her voice lowered. If someone inside the system has been tracking my work, they could predict every move you make through me. Marco cursed under his breath. Luca didn't react outwardly, but something in his gaze hardened. Why didn't you notice this earlier? Elena gave a faint, almost bitter smile. Because I never thought I mattered enough to be watched. That sentence landed heavier than anything else. For a moment, Luca said nothing. Then, you were wrong. The words were quiet, but absolute. Elena looked up at him. Luca stepped closer until he was directly in front of her. You were never invisible in this house, he said. You were just the only one I didn't look closely enough to. A pause. Then his voice lowered. But someone else did. Marco interjected, tense. Boss, if what she's saying is true, then the traitor isn't just inside the organization. They've been building a path through her work for years. Luca nodded once. And now they tried to remove her completely. Elena's breath caught slightly. Because I'm no longer useful? Luca's gaze snapped at her immediately. No. A beat. Because you became dangerous to them. The air shifted. For the first time, Elena felt it clearly. This wasn't about her love for him anymore. It wasn't even just about survival. She had become a key piece in a war she never chose. Marco checked his phone. Security just confirmed something else. Luca didn't look away from Elena. What? There's movement outside the estate perimeter. A pause. Multiple vehicles. Unknown affiliation. Luca's expression darkened. They found us. Elena slowly stood, ignoring the pain in her neck. Then it's already started. Luca turned toward the window. The distant sound of engines grew louder. Headlights began cutting through the night outside the estate gates. Marco pulled his weapon. Boss? Luca looked back at Elena once, not as an employee, not as someone under protection, but as someone whose presence had changed everything. Stay behind me, he said. Elena didn't move. Instead, she whispered, This started because of me. Luca's answer was immediate. No. A beat. It ends because of us. Outside, the first explosion lit up the night sky, and the Romano estate went to war.
The explosion shattered the silence of the night. A distant section of the estate wall collapsed in a burst of fire and smoke. Sirens immediately echoed across the grounds. "Southgate breached!" Marco shouted into his radio. "Multiple hostiles incoming!" Luca didn't hesitate. "Evacuate the east wing, move civilians to the underground level." Guards scattered instantly. Elena stood frozen for only a second before Luca grabbed her wrist. "Move!" She followed him through the corridor as alarms blared overhead. The entire estate had turned into a battlefield. Gunfire erupted near the courtyard. Glass windows exploded inward as bullets tore through the mansion. Elena flinched but kept moving. Luca pushed her into a secured hallway. "Stay here." "I can help," she said immediately. His gaze snapped to her. "No." A pause. "You can barely stand." Elena opened her mouth to argue, but Marco rushed in. "Boss, Salazar's men are inside the perimeter. They're heading toward the main building." Luca cursed under his breath. "Seal the inner corridor." Marco nodded and left. Elena turned toward Luca. "If they get inside, they'll go for the records first." Luca studied her for a brief moment. "You're thinking like them." "I've been forced to." Another explosion shook the building. Dust fell from the ceiling. Luca stepped closer. "Listen carefully." His voice was controlled, but sharper than before. "No matter what happens, you do not leave this corridor." Elena looked at him. "And you?" A brief silence. Then Luca answered honestly. "I end this." Before she could respond, he turned and left. Elena stood alone in the dim hallway.
For a moment, she could only hear her own breathing. Then, footsteps. Not Lucas. She turned sharply. A man stepped out from the shadows at the far end of the corridor. Masked, gun raised. "You're coming with us." Elena stepped back slowly. "No." The man tilted his head. "You think you matter to him?" A second figure appeared behind him. "He doesn't even know what you really are." Elena's chest tightened. "What I am?" The man laughed softly. "You're the reason this war began, and the reason it will end." He raised his weapon. Elena's mind raced, but there was nowhere to run. Then, a gunshot echoed through the corridor. The masked man collapsed instantly. Elena looked up. Luca stood at the end of the hall, guns still raised. His eyes locked on hers. For the first time that night, there was something different in his expression. Not just protection, not just anger, but realization. As he walked toward her, he said quietly, "Now I understand." Elena whispered, shaken. "Understand what?" Luca stopped in front of her and answered, "Why they were watching you before I ever did."
The corridor was still for only a moment. Then distant gunfire reminded them the war was far from over. Elena's breathing was uneven, but she didn't step back when Luca reached her. "What do you mean?" she asked quietly. Luca didn't answer immediately. Instead, he bent slightly and checked her for injuries out of instinct, hands steady, expression unreadable. "You're not bleeding," he said finally. "That's not what I asked." A beat. Luca straightened. Marco found something in Salazar's encrypted files. Elena's stomach tightened. "What kind of something?" Luca looked at her for a long second. Then, "You're not just an accountant in this system." Her breath caught. He continued, 3 years ago, before you were officially transferred into Romano Finance, someone created a secondary access pathway using your identity." Elena frowned. "That's impossible. I never authorized anything like that." "I know." His voice lowered slightly. "That's the point." A silence spread between them. Luca pulled out a small data chip. This was recovered from Salazar's private server. He handed it to her. Elena stared at it like it might burn her fingers. "What is it?" "A tracking map, financial, logistical, and personal." Her throat tightened. "Personal?" Luca nodded once. "It shows every report you've ever touched, every file you've reviewed, every pattern you've flagged." Elena slowly shook her head. "No one would track me like that." Luca's gaze didn't move. "They would if you were the only consistent variable in a system they were trying to control." A distant explosion shook the building again. Dust fell from the ceiling. Marco's voice crackled through Luca's earpiece. "Boss, reinforcements breached the West Wing. We're losing containment." Luca didn't respond. His focus stayed on Elena. "You said earlier you thought you were part of this war." Elena nodded slowly. "I didn't know what I meant." A pause. Luca stepped closer. "Now you do." Elena looked up at him. For the first time, there was no distance between them, not of rank, not of silence, not of unspoken years. Luca's voice dropped. "You were never just observing the system." A beat. "You were the system's blind spot." Elena's lips parted slightly. "That doesn't make sense." "It does. If someone wanted to control a family like mine from the inside, they wouldn't attack me directly." His eyes darkened. "They would shape the flow of information around me." Elena's breath shook. "And I was that flow." Luca didn't deny it. Instead, he said something that made her chest tighten. "And that's why I never noticed you." A silence. Then he corrected himself immediately. "No," his voice sharpened. "That's not true." He stepped closer. "I noticed you." Elena froze slightly. Luca's gaze held hers. "I just didn't understand what I was seeing." Another explosion, closer this time, rattled the corridor. Marco's voice came again, urgent. "Boss, they're heading toward your location." Luca didn't move. Instead, he spoke quietly to Elena. Whatever they built around you ends tonight. She swallowed. And after tonight? For the first time, Luca didn't answer immediately. Outside, the war pressed in. Inside the corridor, everything narrowed to a single moment between them. Then Luca said, "After tonight, you stop being used and start being seen." The lights flickered overhead, and the corridor doors burst open.
The doors slammed open with a metallic crash. Smoke rolled into the corridor first, then silhouettes, armed men moving fast, coordinated. Marco's voice exploded through Luca's earpiece. "Boss, they've split into 3 units. They're inside the west corridor." Luca cut him off. "Hold them. Don't let them reach the central wing." A burst of gunfire echoed from the distance. The estate was collapsing into controlled chaos. Elena instinctively stepped closer to Luca. He didn't tell her to move away this time. Instead, he shifted slightly so she was behind him without hesitation. That small movement said everything. The attackers advanced. Luca raised his weapon calmly. 2 shots. 2 men dropped before they could fire. Elena flinched, but didn't look away this time. She had seen enough violence to understand something important now. This wasn't random. This was precise, controlled. Luca wasn't fighting to survive. He was ending something. A 3rd wave appeared at the far end of the corridor. Marco ran in from the side passage, blood on his sleeve. "Boss, Salazar is not just coordinating this. He's inside the network feed. He's watching everything." Luca's jaw tightened. "Where?" Marco hesitated. "Server room." Luca turned immediately. "Elena stays here." Elena grabbed his arm before he could leave. "I know the system better than anyone in this building." A pause. Luca looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then at her face. "No." She didn't let go. "If this is about information flow, I can help shut it down." A beat. "I can end what they built." Silence stretched between them. Marco spoke quietly. "Boss, she's right." Luca didn't respond immediately. Then, "Stay behind me," he said finally. Not an order, a decision. They moved fast through the burning estate corridors. Elena kept pace beside him, breathing steady despite the chaos. For the first time, she wasn't watching him behind glass or distance. She was beside him. Bullets struck the walls ahead. They turned sharply into a side passage, leading toward the server wing. The door was already half open. Elena froze. "This is wrong," she whispered. Luca looked at her. "What?" Her eyes narrowed. No forced entry, no alarms tripped. Marco arrived behind them. "That's not possible. The system would have flagged." Elena stepped forward slowly. "Unless someone inside already opened it." A beat. Then, the lights inside the server room flickered on by themselves, and a voice came through the speakers. Calm, familiar. "I was wondering when you'd finally bring her here." Elena went still. Marco raised his gun instantly. Luca's expression changed. For the first time in the entire war, something cold and deeply personal settled in his eyes. "Salazar," he said quietly. The voice on the speakers chuckled. "No, Luca." A pause. "You've been chasing the wrong man." Another beat. "You always have." Elena's breath caught. The system screens inside the server room lit up all at once, and every file, every movement, every piece of her life displayed itself across the walls like a confession. The voice continued softly. "Tell me, Elena, you still think you are invisible?"
Elena stood frozen as the server screens lit up the room like a constellation of her own life. Her name appeared across multiple terminals. Not once, dozens of times. Attached to encrypted logs, access routes, and predictive models she had never seen before. Luca stepped slightly in front of her without thinking. "Show yourself," he said coldly. The voice on the speakers didn't rush. "I already have." A new screen flickered on. A single file opened. Project Elena. Marco's grip tightened on his weapon. That's not possible. Elena's throat went dry. What is this? She whispered. The voice replied gently, almost patiently. A long-term behavioral mapping system. A pause. Designed to predict instability in high-value organizations. Luca's jaw tightened. Cut the nonsense. A soft laugh echoed through the room. Luca Romano, always so direct. The screens shifted, now showing surveillance angles, hallways of the estate, the accounting floor, even her apartment building. Elena stepped back instinctively. This is me? Yes, the voice said, but not the version you think. A new file opened, her employment records, except they weren't just records. They were overlays, patterns, predictions, red lines connecting every financial correction she had ever made to every internal breach that followed. Marco muttered, "She's being used as a tracking anchor." Elena shook her head. "No, I don't control any of this." The voice responded immediately. "You were never supposed to." A pause. "You were the system's most valuable constant." The screens shifted again, this time showing a timeline, and at the center of it all, Luca. Every assassination attempt, every internal betrayal, every shift in power, all of it connected back through Elena's data path. Marco took a step back. This is insane. But Luca didn't move. He was staring at the screen, not in shock, in understanding. Slowly, he said, "This isn't about tracking me." A pause. "It's about controlling what I see." Elena turned to him. "What are you saying?" Luca's eyes darkened. "If every piece of intelligence I ever received was filtered through you," he looked back at the screens, "then someone has been shaping my entire world by shaping yours." A silence followed. Then the voice spoke again. "And now you understand." A pause. "You were never the target, Luca." Another pause. "She was." The screens shifted once more, and a final file opened. A live feed from inside the estate, showing a man Elena had never seen before standing in a dim control room. He looked directly into the camera and smiled. "I've been waiting for you both." Luca tightened his hand around his gun. Marco raised his weapon. Elena whispered, "Who is that?" The man tilted his head slightly. "My name?" A pause. Then he said it. And for the first time in the war, Luca Romano went completely still, because he knew that name, and it was someone who should have been dead for 3 years. The name on the screen froze the room. Luca didn't move. Marco noticed it immediately. "Boss?" But Luca's eyes stayed locked on the live feed. "Elena, step back." She didn't. "I need to know who that is." The man on the screen smiled wider, as if hearing her. "You really don't remember me, Elena?" Her chest tightened. "I've never seen you." A soft laugh. "That's what they told you to believe." The screens shifted again. A file opened. A photo. Elena as a child, standing beside a man she didn't recognize, but something in her body reacted before her mind could. Cold recognition without memory. Luca stepped closer to the screen. "This is impossible." The man tilted his head. "Not impossible. Controlled." A pause. "You were selected when you were 12, Elena Moretti, after the accident." Elena's breath hitched. "The accident?" Marco frowned sharply. "What accident?" But Luca's expression changed. He knew. A buried file, a name erased from old Romano archives, a program that didn't officially exist. The man continued softly. "You were never meant to live a normal life." The screens flickered violently. "And Luca Romano was never meant to meet you."
The lights in the server room dimmed. Then, all systems went dark. Emergency lights snapped on. Red. Slow. Heartbeat-like. Marco swore. Power override. Someone shut down the entire estate grid. Luca didn't look away from Elena. Stay close. She nodded. For the first time, she didn't argue. They moved through the corridor silent except for distant gunfire restarting in pockets of the estate. Then, a voice echoed through the internal speakers again. "You're leaving too late." Luca stopped walking. The hallway ahead lit up, doors locking one by one, trapping them. Marco checked the exits. "We're sealed in." Elena looked around. "This isn't defense. It's containment." Luca's jaw tightened. "He's forcing us somewhere." As if responding, the floor beneath them lit up with directional lights, guiding them forward. Marco shook his head. "It's a funnel." Luca exhaled once. "Then we walk into it." Elena looked at him. "You're agreeing to that?" His answer was immediate. "He wants us there anyway." A pause. "And I want answers." The doors opened. A massive underground chamber. Old, hidden beneath the estate foundations. A place neither Marco nor Luca had ever seen. And at the center, the man from the screen. Alive. Waiting. "You came." Elena stepped forward instinctively. Luca stopped her with one hand. The man smiled. "Careful, Luca. You're standing in the room where your entire life was designed." Silence. Then Luca spoke. "Tell me your name." The man finally answered, and the air shifted. Because it wasn't just a name. It was a legacy. A ghost from the Romano past. A man erased after a war Luca's family had buried. Marco whispered behind them. "He was the architect of Romano intelligence systems. He built the original surveillance network." The man nodded. "And you destroyed it." His eyes moved to Elena. "But you rebuilt it without knowing." Elena shook her head. "No, I didn't." The man stepped closer. "Yes, you did." A pause. "You were never meant to be a person in their design. You were the upgrade." Elena stepped back. Luca moved instantly in front of her. "That's enough." The man sighed. "No, Luca. This is where you choose." A screen behind him lit up. 2 files, 2 outcomes. Save her, or save your family's system. Luca didn't hesitate. He raised his gun, and the man smiled, as if that was the answer he wanted. The shot echoed through the chamber, but the man didn't fall. He didn't even flinch. Instead, the lights shifted again. "Physical violence is obsolete here," he said calmly. "This is a controlled environment." Elena's hands trembled. "What do you want?" The man finally looked at her properly. "You." A pause. "And the system inside you." Luca stepped forward. "Over my dead body." A soft smile. That was always the option. Then, the room's walls lit up. Every file, every memory, every moment of Elena's life reconstructed in real time. Her childhood, her adoption records, her erased hospital file. And then, a final projection. Elena standing beside Luca years ago, before she ever officially worked for him. Luca froze. "That never happened." The man whispered. "It did." A pause. "You were not allowed to remember it." Elena's voice broke. "What did you do to me?" The man stepped back. "Nothing." A beat. "Your family did." Silence. Then the final reveal dropped like a blade. You and Luca Romano were already connected before the Mafia ever made you strangers. Luca slowly turned toward Elena. For the first time, he looked like he didn't know what to believe, and the system began to collapse around them.
The chamber trembled as the projection expanded. Elena staggered backward, her mind refusing to align what she was seeing with what she remembered. "No," she whispered. "This isn't real." The man watched her carefully. "It is real, just removed." Luca didn't look at the screens anymore. He looked at her. "Tell me what you feel," he said quietly. Elena shook her head. "I don't know." A pause. Then her voice broke slightly. "But it hurts." That was enough. Luca turned back to the man. "You erased her memory." The man corrected him calmly. "We corrected it." Marco raised his weapon again, but Luca didn't move, because the screens were shifting again, not showing the past anymore, but the process. A facility, doctors, a young Elena being monitored under artificial conditions, and signatures. Romano signatures. Luca's expression hardened. "This is a lie." The man tilted his head. "Is it?" A pause. "You've always believed your family only built power through violence." The screen zoomed in. A file stamped Romano Contingency Project, subject Elena. Elena's breath stopped. "That's my name." Luca stepped closer to the projection. "This project was shut down." The man smiled faintly. "It wasn't shut down. It was transferred." A beat. "To you." Silence cracked through the room. Luca froze. "What?" The man's gaze sharpened. "You inherited her without knowing it." Marco's voice came out low. "Boss, what does that mean?" Luca didn't answer immediately, because something was clicking together in his mind. All the systems, all the access Elena had, all the strange predictive alignment. It wasn't random. It was inherited architecture, a design embedded so deep it looked like instinct. Luca finally said, "She wasn't assigned to me." A pause. "She was already part of the system I control." Elena stepped back sharply. "No, I'm not." But her voice faltered, because the memories were still flickering, not returning, just leaking through. A street, a child's hand, a voice calling her name. "Luca." Her head snapped up. Luca saw it. Something had changed in her eyes. Recognition without clarity. The man exhaled softly. "Good." He turned toward the final console. "Now the system is awake." The chamber lights shifted again. A low alarm began echoing through the underground structure. Marco cursed. "Something's activating beneath us." The man stepped aside, and for the first time the floor beneath Elena illuminated. A network grid, spreading outward like a living map. "This isn't just about memory, it's about control." A pause. "And now that she's unstable," he looked at Luca, "you don't get to choose what she becomes next." Luca stepped forward instantly. "She's not yours." The man smiled. "No." A beat. "She's what you all made together." The ground beneath Elena cracked slightly. Energy pulsed through the system. Her knees weakened. Luca reached her immediately, catching her before she fell. "Elena!" Her breathing was uneven. I can hear something." Luca held her tighter. "What?" Her eyes fluttered. "Like instructions." The man's voice softened. "That's the system reactivating." A pause. "And it always listens to its anchor." Luca looked up slowly. Anchor. Then realization hit him fully. Not fear, not shock, something far more dangerous. Understanding. He tightened his grip on Elena. "No," he said quietly. "She's not your system." A beat. "She's mine to break out of it." The man tilted his head. "Then do it." The chamber lights surged, and the entire underground structure began locking down for the final sequence. Alarms screamed through the underground chamber. The system was no longer observing, it was executing. Walls sealed, air pressure shifted. The grid beneath Elena pulsed brighter, sinking to her heartbeat. Marco looked around. "This place is collapsing into a controlled reset." Luca didn't move from Elena's side. He was holding her steady as she struggled to stay conscious. "Elena," he said sharply, "stay with me." Her voice was faint. I can hear something." The man watched calmly from a distance. "The system is stabilizing her." Luca looked up. "Stop it." The man shook his head. "I didn't start it." A pause. You did. Luca's jaw tightened. Then he made a decision. Not tactical, not strategic, personal. He turned fully toward Elena. Listen to me, he said, her eyes barely focused. You are not a system, a beat. You are not a tool. Her breathing hitched. I don't know what I am. Luca's voice dropped. Then I'll tell you. A pause. You are the only thing in my life that was never predictable. The grid pulsed harder. The system reacted to his words. The man frowned slightly. That won't work. Luca ignored him. He placed a hand gently on Elena's cheek. Do you hear me? She nodded weakly. Good. Then remember this. The chamber shook violently. Luca's voice stayed steady. You were never chosen because you fit the system. A pause. You were chosen because you broke it every time you were inside it. Elena's eyes flickered. Something shifted. The grid spiked. Warning signals flooded the chamber. The man stepped forward. Stop speaking to her. Luca didn't even look at him. Instead, he leaned closer to Elena. And I found you not because they allowed it, his voice softened, but because I finally looked. A silence. Then the system surged violently. The anchor link destabilized. Elena gasped sharply, and for the first time,
The white light vanished as suddenly as it came. Silence followed. Not the silence of peace, the silence of something that had just stopped breathing. Elena collapsed against Luca's chest, unconscious. The grid beneath them flickered once, twice, and went dark. No alarms, no system voice, no movement from the walls. Just stillness. Marco slowly lowered his weapon. It's over? Luca didn't answer immediately. He was focused entirely on Elena. He checked her pulse. Stable, but faint. Not over, Luca said quietly. Just reset. The man across the chamber remained standing. For the first time, his calm expression had fractured. The screens behind him were dead. No live feed, no control panel response. He took a slow step forward. You didn't destroy it, he said. Luca finally looked at him. I didn't need to. A pause. I removed its anchor. The man's gaze sharpened. She was never just an anchor. Luca adjusted Elena carefully in his arms. She is now. Marco stepped forward cautiously. Boss, if the system is down, then what happens to her? Luca's voice stayed low. She wakes up. A beat. And she gets to choose who she is without anyone inside her head telling her otherwise. The man let out a short, quiet laugh. You think you freed her? Luca didn't respond, but the silence itself was an answer. Hours later, the estate above ground was damaged but stable. The war had stopped the moment the underground system collapsed. Like a body losing its command center, every coordinated attack dissolved into confusion. Elena lay in a quiet room inside the east wing. Luca hadn't left. Marco stood outside, silent. Inside, the only sound was Elena's slow breathing. Then, her fingers moved. Luca leaned forward immediately. Elena. Her eyes opened slowly, confused, disoriented, but no longer distant. Luca, she whispered. He didn't correct her. He just watched her carefully. She blinked a few times. My head. I know. A pause. She tried to sit up, but stopped halfway. I remember something. Luca's expression didn't change. What? Her eyes searched the ceiling like fragments were falling into place. A street. A pause. A sound. Someone calling my name. Her gaze shifted to him. You were there. Silence. Luca didn't answer immediately, because if he spoke too fast, It might break whatever was returning. Elena's voice softened. You were younger. A pause. I think I was too. Luca's jaw tightened slightly. Don't force it. She looked at him. I'm not forcing it. A beat. It's just coming back. Outside the room, Marco slowly stepped away from the door, giving them space. Inside, Elena finally asked the question she didn't fully understand yet. Did we know each other before all of this? Luca held her gaze. A long silence stretched between them. Then he answered honestly. Yes. A pause. And they made sure you forgot. Elena's breath caught softly. The weight of that truth settled between them like a second heartbeat. Not fully understood, but undeniably real. And somewhere deep in her mind, another memory began to surface. One she wasn't ready for yet.
Elena didn't sleep that night. Fragments kept returning in uneven flashes, never complete, never stable. A staircase. A younger version of Luca standing too still, too serious for his age. Her own voice, faint but certain. Don't trust them. She woke again before dawn, sweat cold against her skin. Luca was still there, sitting in the chair beside her bed, watching her like he hadn't moved in hours. You didn't leave, she said quietly. I said I wouldn't. A pause. Elena studied him for a long moment. Tell me the truth. Luca didn't hesitate. I already did. That we knew each other before? Yes. A beat. And more than that. Elena's fingers tightened slightly on the blanket. Then why don't I remember you clearly? Luca looked away for the first time. Because you weren't supposed to survive what happened. Silence. That landed heavier than anything before it. Elena sat up slowly. Explain. Luca finally stood, walking to the window as if the words were harder to say when facing her directly. There was a prototype system years ago, not the one you saw, the original. He paused. It wasn't built for control. It was built for prediction, human behavior mapping, family warfare prevention. Elena listened, but something inside her already knew this wasn't just history. It failed, he continued, and when it collapsed, everyone involved was erased from public record. A beat. You were part of the field testing. Elena's breath caught. I was a child. I know. His voice was quieter now. You weren't supposed to be inside it. You were taken in after your family died. That memory hit differently. Not fully formed, but enough to hurt. Elena whispered, And you? Luca turned back toward her. I was part of the Romano oversight branch. A pause. I saw you there. Her chest tightened. You were supervising me. No. His answer was immediate. I stopped them from deleting you. Silence. Elena tried to steady her breathing. So everything after that, the memory loss, the new identity, they rebuilt your life and placed you where they could still observe the remnants of the system inside you. Elena shook her head slowly. That doesn't explain why I feel. She stopped. Why I feel like I lost something I never had words for. Luca walked back toward her. Because they didn't erase emotions. A pause. They erased context. That line stayed in the air longer than anything else. Elena looked up at him. Then what were we? Luca didn't answer immediately. For the first time, there was something unguarded in his expression. Not strategy, not control, just truth. You were the only person I ever had to choose to protect, he said. A beat. Everything else I controlled. Silence. Outside,
The estate was finally quiet. No alarms, no threats, no movement of war. Just stillness after collapse. Elena slowly swung her legs off the bed. Then why does it feel like I lost you, too? Luca didn't move closer. He only said softly, "Because you did." A long pause. "And I lost you first." That broke something in the room, not dramatically, quietly, like pressure releasing after too long. Elena closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, her voice was steadier. "I want all of it back." Luca studied her carefully. "And if you don't like what you find?" A faint, almost sad smile touched her lips. "Then at least it will be mine." Silence. Luca nodded once. No resistance, no control, just acceptance. "Then I'll stay, until you remember." Elena looked at him for a long moment, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she was being watched. She felt like she was being waited for. The next morning came slowly. No alarms, no threats, no movement of war. Just sunlight breaking through the estate windows like nothing had ever happened beneath it. Elena stood in the garden where everything had felt simple. Luca joined her without speaking. For a while, neither of them said anything. Then she asked, "If I remember everything, will anything change?" Luca didn't pretend. "Yes." A pause. "But not how you think." She turned slightly towards him. "How then?" He looked at her directly. "You'll understand that none of this started when you were pulled into my world." A beat. "It started when I refused to let you disappear from it." Silence. Elena exhaled slowly. Then, "I remember enough now." Luca's gaze sharpened slightly. "Enough for what?" She turned fully towards him. "For this." A pause. "For knowing that even without all the memories, I still recognize you." The words hung in the air. Luca didn't move for a moment. Then he stepped closer. Not like a mafia boss, not like a man in control of a city. Just someone standing in front of the only constant he had ever known. "You were never meant to be part of my world," he said quietly. Elena met his eyes. "Neither were you meant to matter in mine." A faint, almost relieved exhale left him. "And yet, here we are." Silence. No war now. No system. No one watching. Just two people standing in the aftermath of everything they were built, broken, and rewritten through. Elena spoke softly. "What happens now?" Luca answered without hesitation. "Now, you choose." A pause. "Not the system, not the past, not me, only you." The wind moved gently through the garden. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped forward. And this time, she didn't wait for memory. She chose the present. "I choose you," she said quietly. Not because she was forced to remember, but because she finally understood who she was without anyone else deciding it for her. Luca didn't move. He only reached out and gently held her hand. And for the first time in a world built on control, war, and silence, nothing was taken, only given. And it was enough.